Welcome, Cosmic Explorers, to Cosmic Classroom Lessons from Starlight Synergy School, the podcast where we journey through the nexus of science and spirituality to empower your life. I'm your guide, Katie Dickieson, cosmic engineer and founder of Starlight Synergy School, and your fellow traveler on this path of discovery and transformation. This podcast is for seekers, dreamers, and anyone ready to uncover the mysteries of the universe within themselves. Whether you're curious about the cosmic forces that shape our existence or seeking practical tools for personal empowerment, you're in the right place. By tuning in, you'll discover how to navigate life's challenges with grace and strength, drawing on the power of both your intellect and intuition. You'll learn strategies for calming the storm within, setting boundaries that honor your soul, and ultimately stepping into the empowered, radiant being that you are meant to be. Get ready to transform your understanding of yourself and the world around you. If you're inspired to explore further and join our community of cosmic learners, follow us on social media, subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform, and visit our website to learn more about our courses. Together, we can unlock the secrets of the stars and the untapped potential within. Let's embark on this cosmic journey together. Welcome to the Cosmic Classroom. Please remember, this podcast is for educational and inspirational purposes only. While we explore topics related to personal and spiritual growth, it's important to seek professional advice for individual concerns. Our journey together is one of exploration and discovery, not a substitute for professional guidance. Get ready to elevate your essence, honey, because the stars are not the limit. Welcome to another transformative episode of Cosmic Classroom Lessons from Starlight Synergy School, where we delve into the profound intersections of personal growth, spirituality, and the science of being. Today, we are venturing into the heart of community healing through the lens of diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI, and exploring its indispensable role in personal development. Joining us in this critical conversation is our esteemed celestial guide, Miranda McDaniel, an expert in DEI and a champion of community building at Starlight Synergy School. Miranda brings a wealth of knowledge and experience guiding us through the nuances of creating inclusive spaces where every individual can thrive. In a special edition, we're also joined by Cammie Williams, a board-certified behavior analyst, a Black queer woman, and a cherished childhood friend. Cammie's insights will enrich our discussion, offer a multifaceted view of DEI's impact. Together, we'll uncover the essence of DEI, confront the challenges of whitewashing in personal development, and strategize on building inclusive healing spaces. Our journey will illuminate the path toward collective healing and the vital importance of embracing diverse experiences in our quest for personal and communal growth. Stay tuned as we dive into the deep discussions, shedding light on how DEI not only shapes our communities, but also our individual journeys towards empowerment and understanding. Thank you for joining us on this journey of discovery and healing. Let's open our hearts and minds as we navigate the complexities of healing as a community. Miranda, I would like you to introduce yourself to everybody in all of your excellence and all the different things that you do.
All right, I'm super excited to be here. My name is Miranda McDaniel. I am the co-owner and co-founder of the Unpacked project. We started off as a podcast aimed to predominantly help white women unlearn their biases and how to be better allies. And that has since turned into a business that helps small businesses create strategic strategies within the DEI field and framework. So basically building more inclusion within their businesses, fostering more inclusivity, and understanding kind of some holes and some disconnects in their business and how they can bridge those gaps to get to where they want to be. So my work really started off many, many years ago with the YMCA back home in San Francisco. And I was really lucky to work for an organization that fully supported the whole person, understood the importance of I worked with youth, so really understood the importance of just building inclusivity in classrooms, safe spaces. We partnered with the school district. I ran after school programs, and we implemented restorative practices, so reducing shame and blame in classrooms and understanding why we're feeling in the way that we do about things. We would do small circles to just increase participation in classrooms, getting children to build relationships with each other, people they might not otherwise if we didn't intentionally do this work. Really just creating safe spaces. And that work with children was really amazing to see, working with kids as young as 5, 6 in kindergarten, from the beginning of the school year just to halfway through the school year, the changes that you can see in a community, right? And how working very intentionally to build community and spaces with any age, right, reaps so many benefits, right? People feel safer. They feel like they can bring their whole selves. They're more prone to talk about what happened. They don't feel shame. They just, people get to be authentic. And there's so much beauty that really comes from that. And so I've since taken that work and utilized it with adults. So yeah, that's what I do. I really care about this work. I think it's super important. Regardless of what we're doing, I think it can be implemented in any kind of work, in any relationship. I think it's really important. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, that's awesome. I actually used to work in the school system as a behavior analyst, and people like you are so needed. So needed. So that is awesome. Thanks for sharing that.
Thank you, Cammie. I appreciate it.
I didn't even know that about you. I didn't know the YMCA part. That's so awesome. And that you did that in San Francisco too. Like, what an amazing community to be a part of.
Yeah, girl. And unfortunately, not all YMCAs are the same. Then I moved to Florida. And I was like, oh, you're not doing any of this work. And we can clearly, there's a correlation between not doing this work and the issues that we're having, like in our school systems and our families and our state, like all of that. Right. So then I started working for myself. I was like, fuck all this. Y'all don't know what's important. And I'm just going to create the spaces I want to be in.
Yeah.
Which is awesome, which is so needed in Florida, especially. Miranda, let me ask you, what was your journey to becoming an DEI expert and community builder?
Yeah, there's a few things. Like I said, there's sort of my personal journey, like just me and myself, and then like work. Obviously, those two are intertwined. Leaving the YMCA, moving to Florida, working in a lot of toxic work cultures that really didn't implement this kind of work, right? Because even though I did that with youth, I worked for an organization that really from the top down in this, right? Understanding the whole human, supporting the whole human, creating safe spaces, allowing people to come to work in their authentic selves. And I worked for a lot of companies that just didn't do that. And I felt it. I kind of bounced around and I was really unhappy. And I then pretty much my last job, I was experiencing the Sunday scaries. I was just overworked, overwhelmed, underpaid. And there just wasn't any space to discuss things. I remember at one point, my boss came up to me and was like, there have been some complaints that you're yelling at your staff. And I'm like, that's so outside of who I am as a human, like in any relationship, in any work environment. I'm like, that's just not true. That's not true. So who said that? Is there someone I could talk to? Do you have an example? I'm just trying to understand. I'm seeking to understand. And it very much was like, I can't tell you, just stop doing it. And I'm like, okay. A lot of other things, other people calling HR on folks for no reason, like just like lies and cattiness and just really not good. So I just reached my breaking point. And so I jumped and started working for myself. And in that time, so this is all around kind of 2020, 2021, we all remember the murder of George Floyd. And so my friend and I, actually my best friend out here, Noelle De La Cruz, we decided that we wanted to do something. We were tired of just continually posting on social media about injustices and things we were really frustrated by. At that time, we were in an uproar. We were in the state of Florida. People are rioting. And we decided to start our podcast. So our podcast, like I mentioned earlier, was really rooted in diversity, equity, and inclusion, unlearning your biases, becoming better allies, and really just anti-racism in general. So we started that work. And obviously, I have my background that I had just shared with you. And in that work, we interviewed so many people that were kind of moving this forward, right? Organizations, individuals, either working to increase awareness about racism, to create allies, folks in just like all types of fields doing this work, working with youth, working with individuals, organizations. And so through that, we then started doing work, like I said, with small businesses to create strategic plans for diversity, equity, and inclusion. My personal background is in youth development and psychology, but like I mentioned, the work that I did with youth back home in the YMCA, trained in multiple different things that I implement with adults to this day. And then just training and development is what I continue to do throughout this time.
And for those who might not be familiar, because, okay, this is something that I have noticed, especially in Florida, more than anywhere else that I've lived. And I need to stop laughing when I say this, just because I'm like, what the fuck? Why don't people understand this? But also I'm a white woman and I should recognize even more like how much people do not understand that this even exists. Because a lot of times I notice when I'm speaking to white people, I'll be like, oh yeah, DEI. And they're like, what's DEI? And like, how would you define DEI and its importance in the current social climate?
Such a big question. And I feel I can talk about it all day. And have I limited down to a very specific definition? I have not. But I do think from my heart space, first of all, DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? So a few things. One, we often think of diversity as in color or race. And it is not just that. Diversity is race, age, size, language, right? Anything, disabilities, so many things that make us different. And so when we think about creating an inclusive space, it is not just based on the color of our skin or our race or ethnic backgrounds, right? It is all of these things that really make up our identities. And often when we're talking about DEI, we're talking about marginalized identities. So those identities I just mentioned, based on race, class, like homelessness, age, size, disabilities, things like that. Equity, if you've ever seen, I love that image so much. I wish I kind of had it, but it's, you get it right. Cammie's nodding her head. Some people believe that we need to treat everyone fairly. The image is you have people of varying height trying to look over a fence and you give them all the same size box to stand on. That's fairness, right? The size of the boxes are the same. It doesn't matter how tall you are. Everyone's going to get the same thing because that's what's fair. But that doesn't always help us depending on where we're starting at. If you have someone who's 5 foot tall trying to look over a 7-foot fence and you give them a box that's the same size as someone who's 6'5" looking over a 7-foot fence, they're still not going to be able to see over the fence, right? And so this is what's important when I talk about understanding the whole human is like, where is everyone starting from? You know, that statement of pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Like, I hate that shit so much because we all have different barriers that we experience. And sometimes those are financial. Sometimes they're just things based off of biases that people have about the color of your skin, the size that you are, the age that you are, your ability to do a job because of whatever your identity may be. And so when we think of diversity, equity, and inclusion, it really is understanding the whole person, creating safe spaces for all of these marginalized identities, and being able to come into a workspace and just be your authentic self, right? So how do we create a space that people feel that in when they've dealt with barriers often throughout their entire life? And often also have self-limiting ideas as well because of the stories that they've been told, right? So not only do we believe these things about ourselves, but we're being told these things about ourselves. So undoing a lot of that is what DEI is to me.
It's cool too, because I think what you're talking about is literally one of my favorite and I think most essential framework, which is intersectionality, right? There is not just one kind of part of us, right? Like we all are made up of these like social Venn diagrams, if you will, that all have to do with how each of us are accessing privilege, accessing marginalization. And so I love you speaking about that whole person perspective, because really that's it. So speaking of intersectionality, in what ways do you think focusing on DEI contributes to building a stronger, more inclusive kind of space within each community, even within marginalized communities?
Right. Yeah. So I'm glad that you brought that up, right? Because again, what we all have something to unlearn. So the other thing is often people think if I am Black, I mean, speaking as a Black woman or a woman of color, if I have a disability, then I understand all of these things, right? Because I have this lived experience, but we only have our lived experience, right? And that is not someone else's lived experience. And when we deal with intersectionality, everything is so nuanced, everything is situational and based off of, again, someone's own experience that not one experience is the same. So when we work to understand these things about people, it just creates a stronger community. And so I think something that people often forget is you can have colorism within communities of color, right? You can have people that shame folks with disability in communities of disability, right? Do you have a seen disability or an unseen disability? So again, we all have biases. We all carry these things with us, even about our own selves. And that's where some of those self-limiting beliefs come. So when we're able to understand those things, when we seek learning and understanding and really look from an outside perspective of our own biases, then we can start seeing how we may engage with people in oppressive ways, and how we may engage with people that look just like us or identify just like us in oppressive ways. And so I think a lot of this work is really just being able to say, I don't know what I don't know. And maybe I have harmed someone and I am sorry about that, but I'm here to learn. And so I think that's the biggest thing about DEI when we talk about creating safe spaces. Like there's space to learn. It's okay to get it wrong. I mean, don't intentionally be harmful, but seek to understand. And when we do that, we start to shed a lot of preconceived notions or biases that we have, and we learn to become better allies within marginalized communities and even without or outside of them.
I know a big conversation, like when we all first got together talking about the starting of Starlight Synergy School, was how to incorporate DEI into a personal development field and kind of like the whitewashing that has happened in these spaces. And so I want to ask this question is to both of you guys, for what are some barriers marginalized individuals face when trying to access and pursue personal development resources?
I think for me, the presentation of whiteness is the biggest barrier in that it just elicits. You know how people are like violence begets violence. I feel like whiteness begets whiteness, and that it really does just elicit this centering of all the things besides this huge elephant in the room. And the reality is, for people of marginalized identities, our personal development and our wellness oftentimes is coming at like a consequence of the very real oppression that we tend to face, right? Whereas like in white spaces, at least from my experience, it's almost like we're forgetting that these very real things are happening and we're trying to get well. So I think, especially like on social media, the conversation about like manifestation is a huge one where people are like, you want to manifest $500? This is what you do. Like you write it down, like 369 method or whatever the case may be, forgetting there is a social construct that is so real that completely keeps the oppressed in these very real ways. And not that that means that like a marginalized and oppressed identity can't manifest, but I guess I'm saying that to say, I think we have to talk about, you've been talking about, which I love your perspective of the whole human. We have to talk about, I think, the whole human experience. And that absolutely has to address their lived experience, not only individually, but also as a culture and as a people within whatever intersection that they may lie. So for me, I guess in short, for my biggest barrier, I think is just this very potent kind of tone deaf demonstration whiteness.
Yeah. Yes. Tone deaf is a great word. I mean, honestly, I think of so many things that are barriers, right? Laws that are already written in to oppress. So something that comes up for me, again, a lot of the podcast episodes, they ranged and really opened our eyes. And I'll share all of this so you can include it in the show notes, Katie. Just before I forget, we do have 2 free toolkits, one on anti-bias and one on allyship that you can include. And then I'll include a link to the podcast episodes. You can find us on Spotify. But one of our episodes, I don't even remember at this point, but we spoke to someone about just like communities of color and the rates at which folks are arrested and incarcerated. And you already deal with the marginalized identity of being a person of color, right? And let's just say a male of color. And then your arrest rate, now you have a record, you get out, you're trying to better yourself. And then all these barriers that are in place, like you've already served your time. Okay. So when we kind of talk about shame and blame, right? Like you've served your time, but you're still suffering consequences because of that. You can't access certain jobs now. So you can't really get yourself out of maybe a position of like economic disparity, right? You're a person of color. So the likelihood that you will be rearrested just because of the color of your skin, right, is a barrier, right? And I know that you're specifically asking about like self-development. I mean, this actually directly relates to self-development, right?
That's key to getting to personal development, you know?
And so, and so these are, those might seem like kind of like bigger things than most people deal with, but I think that sort of a system that's in place to consistently hold people down is very real in most situations, right? For marginalized identities. If you have a disability, you can only have so much income. or else you
Yeah,
can't
and don't get
participate.
married. Don't get
Yeah,
married, or else you're
exactly.
going to lose your benefit. Yeah.
It's absolutely insane. So I'm like, do you know these systems are created to just continually oppress marginalized identities. It's absolutely insane to me. So those are some that I think of. The other thing is just access to resources. I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area. I went to college at San Francisco State. And at that point, I worked with youth in like inner cities or urban areas, whatever we're calling them now, like the hood, right? And there we grew up in the Bay Area. The ocean, I mean, San Francisco's only so large. The ocean is like 20 minutes away. There were kids that had never seen the ocean, right? So we talk about access, and if it's right there, you can apply that to anything. It's right there. It's within arm's reach. Why can't you access it? We really need to do a better job of stepping back and looking at all of these barriers that are in place for folks, right? So I think a lot of those things apply to really self-development. What resources do you have? What have you even been exposed to? How much money does your family have to support you to go to college, to create a better life for yourself? Okay, you want to start a business. Now you have to deal with so many self-limiting beliefs about yourself, right? It's just kind of barrier after barrier after barrier. And Katie, as an entrepreneur, and Cammie as well, in the work that you do, we as women, you can already attest to the barriers that we face just because we identify as women, right?
Yeah.
So very, very much the same.
I think too, what you just brought up, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Katie,
No,
but
you're
you
good.
also just brought up too is, in a lot of these wellness spaces, it's based in this culture of individualism, which is literally a huge indication of what whiteness is. Whereas with marginalized groups, we typically are more collective beings. Like that literally is a part of our ancestral like DNA. So it's what does that look like if I'm trying to sell you this course on becoming your best self? What does that look like if like my brother can't access it, or my parents can't access it, or my grandma or my cousins or my aunts or my uncles or whatever? And then it's like going back to that level of like exposure to some of these things. What does that look like? Me and Katie, like we grew up in the suburbs outside of Detroit. So it's like, what does that look like though for like our family members who weren't in the suburbs, who they were, like you were saying, kind of in the inner city? We have two completely different exposures to privilege, really, and accesses to privilege. And so some of this stuff can just sound so foo-foo when I can barely pay my rent and I'm trying to sell you this course that I know is going to save your life. You know what I mean? We have two completely different starting points, kind of going back to what you were saying in the beginning of the call too.
One of the things I do want to ask you guys, and I didn't have this planned on our list or anything, but also I kind of want to pinpoint on the topic of, okay, so let's say you do get that access and then you are part of that space, but then you're the only Black woman in that space, or you're the only disabled person in that space, or the only queer person in that space. And again, I don't even know really what my question is here, but more about the experience. Like, how, if you guys have been in those spaces before, how has that impacted your ability to actually, number one, be in your feminine and absorb the information, as opposed to maybe like needing to feel the need to teach people things? Or are you actually able to absorb the information the way that it is meant? Or how has that impacted your ability to do that?
Okay, so on Netflix, I don't know if you've seen it yet, but that show, The Program, it's like a.
I
You
told
watch
Katie
it
not
next
to
to me.
watch it.
So
I literally
good.
text her
Okay,
like trigger
so
warning. Do not watch that, Katie. Yeah.
yeah, it's a lot. But one of the things, I mean, it's a really good show. So many things stuck. But one of the things that they said is that when you're really, the entire program is about behavior modification, and they're breaking down these children, like young adults and young teens, to create better behavior. But they do it by creating high stress situations, shaming them, blaming them. It's really sad. I mean, there's abuse, all types of stuff. But one of the things that they mentioned as they're talking to attorneys and people kind of that do this work to support people that have been, traumatized and now have PTSD, is that when you're functioning in a space of high anxiety and high stress that's placed on you, you can't do these things. Like, you can't access your cognitive like thoughts, you know what I mean? Like, you're in such a high stress situation that you're just kind of grasping at whatever. And so you'll see a lot of things in people, like forgetting, or just like not really functioning from their like foundational best place, right?
Mhm.
And so when I think of these kind of situations that you talk about, Katie, while they can actually be as extreme, but I know for me personally, they have not necessarily been, but they're still not spaces I want to be in. I realize a lot of jobs that I've held with, for me, predominantly white folks, or I also have ADHD. And I realized I was diagnosed late, just a few years ago. I realized how having a lack of understanding of people with a special need can be really challenging in work.
Mhm.
Right? When you're thinking of what is the word that I'm looking for? I'm forgetting, but basically like how we like organize and kind of like function on a higher level, right?
Mhm.
And not being able to necessarily do those things or lacking some skills in that area, right? I think I go to a yoga studio and it's predominantly white. And when I walk into this space and I'm doing my yoga and I'm looking around and I see no one that looks like me, I feel really uncomfortable. I recently was asked if I was interested in, I do social media management as well. And I was asked if I was interested in kind of applying for this job. And I was speaking to the woman and I had said, "Oh, I had actually recently met you." And I kind of was describing what I look like. And I was like, "Oh, yeah, you had come up to me. We were standing in the back talking, curly hair, brown skin." And she was like, "Oh, aren't we all a little black?" And I was like, "No, we're not. We're not all a little black." She was a white woman, obviously. And she proceeded to say, "Oh, don't mind me. I just joke around." And then she said something else and then shared that another woman of color had told her that she should not say that or joke like that. So now here I am in my mind. I'm like, you've already been told by one person that you shouldn't say something like this. And now you feel the need to say it again. So now
Is she looking for permission from you?
I don't know. I wasn't here to entertain it. In that moment, I could have chosen to educate her, but that's not my job. And I do it in the work that I do because people are seeking it out.
Yep.
But in everyday occurrences, that is not my job.
You
And
also deserve to get paid for when you do work, and this is your job. You're not
well,
doing it for free.
yes, fair. And so that to me was a moment. My friends were kind of like, money's green. You should still apply to the job if they're going to pay well. And I was like, I can already tell you that's not a space that I'm going to want to be in, because if this is something that's happened within one of our very first interactions, it's going to happen again. And so you talk about kind of these spaces. Now this is work that I potentially had to turn down, right? Because it's a space that I know that I'm not going to want to be in. So I think things like that happen often, very often, microaggressions.
Yeah, my sentiments are honestly just the same. I limit myself to whiteness, honestly, as suicide prevention. And that may sound melodramatic, but I don't know a better way to say it. I refuse to go. I shouldn't say I refuse. There are certain places that I do find enjoyment with where I am the only or one of the only, my gym in particular. But really, when it comes especially to my free time, but honestly, even in my professional life, I have made this conscious decision that I'm always going to be me. Unfortunately, kind of going back to the intersectionality approach, even in the Black space, being like a Black gay woman, because of all of these religious ways that we've all been socialized, I often am marginalized in even that space. And I also have ADHD, so the same thing. I typically am kind of, I always feel at least rather that I'm like marginalized in whatever community. But specifically, I guess when it comes to whiteness, it's just not something that I allow myself to really subject myself to. Katie, literally, I can't, people think I'm making this up. I'm talking sixth, seventh grade, we were having these conversations. Imagine how I feel at 34 still having it. I can't. I have zero desire to, unless I'm being paid to, which I am, right, in some cases. But even that, depending on who that audience is that I'm speaking to, there does have to be, I think, just kind of this baseline level of safety that I have to feel in any space, right? Because it's exhausting. It is absolutely exhausting and it's triggering. And so I really have to be really, really mindful of my exposure, especially my intentional exposure, because truly, if I'm not careful, like it is severely detrimental to my health.
And that just goes right back to the conversation based on fairness and equity. I think right there, what you just explained, both of you, is something that people don't take into a lot of people don't take a lot of this into consideration, but that extra step is even the fact that it's like, just because you're offered a job, just because you're offered a position does not mean that it's your job to take that and put your mental or physical safety at harm's length just because it is a job. Like, so that's just one extra barrier on top of it. And then you probably get criticized for not taking that. It's like, well, you're offered the job. But I'm not supposed to take a job that's going to harm me. Like, I shouldn't have to feel unsafe in spaces that I'm going to just because they're paying me.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a lot of guilt with that, I'm sure, too. I don't know, Miranda, if you felt that, where you're almost like I felt before, where I'm like, am I being ungrateful for turning this down? Or maybe I just need to change my perspective, or whatever the case may be. I have come across very few people who really understand, yes, this is a job, and yes, it may be tied to income and benefits and all this stuff, but at what cost? Everything comes at a cost, and I'm always doing like these risk benefit analysis with everything, because it's tough. It's really, really tough.
Yeah. I experienced that. I think since leaving kind of corporate and 9-to-5 work and starting to work for myself, I've had to do a lot of work on myself, which I already was. I've always been a person that would seek growth and understanding, but I think it's really been much more fast paced since I've become an entrepreneur, right? Fully self-employed, because you really start to look at all situations with a much finer lens or fine tooth comb, right? And so I think I've gotten over that fairly quickly because it's been so much easier to see. I'm like, this is not a me issue. You know what I mean? And then also in doing the work that I do, like, it's really come full circle to help me kind of understand all of these things.
How does generational trauma or generational curses complicate the personal growth journey for marginalized groups? And I feel like you almost touched on that when you talked about a Black man being arrested, but then talk about, or if you don't mind talking about because I know that there's a lot of people out there that don't even know what generational trauma is or generational curses, and what is the impact that has for the future of families and kids.
Cammie, did you want to say anything? I don't know.
The thing I was thinking about, I love this question because I'm really obsessed with Dr. Joy Reid, I believe is her last name, her work on post-traumatic slave. And what it's talking about is quite literally how many just practices we have every day that are clearly just tied directly from slavery, but what that really kind of looks like from generation to generation, and really how that really does impact a lot of the stuff that we go through. And it is such a huge barrier. I have found really trying to kind of consider a different perspective of human suffering, especially if we bring in the religious aspect, considering a different perspective of this idea that somehow we're more holy and more worthy when we're long suffering in these ways. And it's very, very tough. But again, it goes right back to slavery. I think what is really interesting, though, is I love this question when white people actually talk about it with white people, because I think sometimes whiteness and white supremacy, I don't think white people yet know how fucked it has you all too, in ways that like are severe. I think as marginalized groups and the people of color, I think we're able to kind of identify, you know what I mean? Like how supremacy like really has us deeply impacted. But I think even for white people, and in any of us, right? Like men are victims of the patriarchy. Like any of us can be victims. And we're reinforced by our own oppression in many ways. But yeah, I don't want to go on a tangent. I want to hear you answer, Miranda. But anyways, post-traumatic slave syndrome is the first thing that came up in my mind, because it's really deep. It's literally like, I don't endorse the body keeps score, because ever since I heard about that author and how problematic he is, but the thing I do like that he talks about is how all of this literally is in our body, like the trauma, the pain, the heartache, the strength, right? The bravery, the courage, all these things that are so in our body. And when we actually are able to integrate like the mind, the body, the emotions, like when we're really able to kind of integrate this all into one, it's this really powerful thing. But we're talking about generations and generations of shit, and it's a lot. But anyway, Miranda, I want to hear what you have to say. I'm sorry.
No. I'm glad that you mentioned that, because that's really where I was going to go, was like how it's downloaded into our DNA, right? Like from birth. You think of maybe a mother gets into an accident while she's pregnant, right? And then she suffers PTSD, like that's downloaded into her child. A parent that gives, I have a really close friend that gave birth recently, and her child was not breathing upon being born, right? And so the trauma that she experienced in that moment now lives out in her day to day, right? Where she's terrified that something's going to happen to her child. And so when you think of that energy that just comes from you because of that fear, that's really kind of the same thing that's happening, right? And now you talk about generations on generations on generations of this happening, of families being torn apart, of women being raped, of just such really deep seated emotional turmoil. How do you think that that's going to play out, right? Earlier, I talked about a lot of self-limiting beliefs. It comes across in family dynamics, in how what we think we deserve, our relationship to money, our relationship to, like you mentioned, how can you live in your like feminine energy, right? So all of these things, and again, these are things I'm talking about really from a Black perspective, but you think about, again, folks with disabilities, folks who have larger bodies and have been told they come from a family lineage of larger people living in a community that is obsessed with being thin. How are these things going to play out in your life? You're going to feel unworthy. You're going to feel shame. You don't belong here. And that is really challenging when you're talking about kind of doing some of this personal growth work, where the work asks you to do this, right? But you're constantly here. So now you're feeling tension, right? So a lot of like shame comes from that. It's like, why isn't this easier for me? And oftentimes people don't even understand the effects that they're feeling because something hasn't necessarily happened to them directly, right? But until you really step back and start to understand this work and how things have affected you, I mean, it's anything that you would do in therapy, right?
Yeah.
Until you step back and start to do this work and really understand how language affects us, how previous experiences affect us, how our parents' experiences have affected us. I didn't even realize, it wasn't until the podcast, I feel like, again, so much growth. I'm adopted. I had never heard of adoption trauma. And then I did, and I was like, oh my goodness, like that explains so much, right? Around my issues of commitment and abandonment, right? Like you start your life off being abandoned by your parents, the people who are supposed to love you. And yes, of course, I have a family that loves me and they're amazing human beings, and I've never felt less than or unloved. But that's where you started. And so you have to always be doing this work and become really cognizant of these experiences that continue to hold us back. So yeah, it's really downloaded in our DNA, like Cammie said.
Yeah. Before I move on to the next topic that we're going to discuss, I did want to say something. I remember the first time I ever texted you, Cammie, about, I can't even remember what the topic was. I feel like it was something along the lines of feeling like I can feel most like myself around Black women, and that I feel most joy when I'm around Black people, and that I feel like I'm like free to be myself. And I remember you saying some comment about just how badly white supremacy has impacted me. And I remember in that moment, and like, I think this is important to say also because like most of the people who are my following are white people. So I feel like a lot of white people will be listening to this. And that was that, like, when you said that to me, I remember my first thought being, white supremacy can't impact me because like I'm like, but my first thought was like, it's going to take away from how much it's impacted Black people. And like that, like part can't come on me. But then when I like dissected it more, I was like, if I don't fucking dissect this, then this is what continues to impact other people. And my inability to experience pure joy because of how white supremacy has impacted me, then it's just a fucking domino effect. And like you said, I feel like it's so weird. I can't even. Did you guys ever watch the movie What the Bleep Do We Know? What they believe, do you know? Okay, so it's about quantum physics. And there's this moment where they're talking about this woman who's deaf is like the main character of the movie, right? And she's like going on like seeing how the world really is, not how we actually perceive it being. And there's this moment where she's like standing on a beach and she's looking out over the water, and it's talking about the first time that Christopher Columbus came to North America and how Native Americans couldn't see the boats because they had never seen a boat like that before. But then as the ships got closer and closer to the beach, they would see like the ripples coming off of something, but they still didn't see the ship until it was literally like 50 feet off from the surface. And it's like this moment where this indigenous man comes and he like taps her third eye, and all of a sudden she can see the boats. And I'm like, that is that moment for me. That's one of those moments for me. And I think that that's a big moment for white people to recognize, is just how much like their own happiness, their own growth, their own, all of these things, like their anger, their frustration, like them being against other people, and all of this hostility comes from white supremacy and the way that they have been suppressed in their own selves. And like that I just think that that's huge, because I feel like I'm sure when white people first hear stuff like that, it's a defense thing. Like all white people want to be defensive about, I'm not like this. I love everyone. All lives matter. All these kinds of things. And it's like, no, like you don't realize how much healing could happen with your own recognition of how you have been impacted by the exact same systems.
Yes. Because we're all in the same system, right? That's the thing. And it's overarching. It's not just here in the US, you know what I mean? Yeah. This has been copied and implemented in so many other cultures. So then you have colorism. We may not have racism to the same extent that we do here, but it exists in other forms for sure.
So next I want to move on to like how we are building the space at Starlight Synergy School. And I have been asking everyone, all the different practitioners, to take these questions as imagining as if Starlight Synergy School is your baby, and in the future, like what are all possibilities and everything that you see and believe could happen in this space. What was I going to say? I can't remember, but yes, think about it as if it is your baby, and that what is it that you would want to see happen in these areas? And so the first question would be, what strategies can be employed to make personal? Also, wait, I do want to say one thing is that I'm not asking you to, as Black women, do my work for me. Like I will do my own work on this, obviously, but I do think that your genius of creating what would be beautiful in your heart and in your mind is important, and for what you guys want to see in the world. So what strategies can be employed to make personal development spaces more inclusive? How can empathy and understanding help heal the bridge divides within communities?
Second piece of that, I think empathy and understanding to me, it feels a little self-explanatory, right? Like empathy and understanding is going to help in any situation. You think about relationships, you think about in partnerships, right? If you just worked to understand me a little bit instead of coming from a place of defensiveness, right? I think seeking to understand is one of my like foundational core values. I think when we are curious about people, and we're curious about people's thought processes, and we're curious about their experiences, and we're curious, right? When we're curious, it allows people to open up. And sometimes folks feel uncomfortable, right? Like we're not all in someone's business. Tell me more, tell me more, tell me more. But when we're working to create safe spaces and we pair that with curiosity or seeking to understand, it really creates a beautiful space for people to learn about each other. And when we have spaces that work to create more inclusion and are diverse, there's this richness because we're around people who are different than us, right? And when I think of strategies that can be employed to make personal development spaces more inclusive, those are kind of the foundational things that I would encourage anyone to do. Learn, seek to understand. We have so much free information out there. There's YouTube, there's books, there are podcasts. There are communities on social media. I mean, there is nothing short of information out there to seek out, right? So start there. There's a lot of information. You don't have to seek it all out, but start somewhere. Again, like I said, we have 2 really simple toolkits that you could go through and kind of see, where do my biases lie? Something I always suggest to people is the Harvard Implicit Bias Test, which has all these different marginalized identities, and you kind of do these tests online to see where your biases might lie. Very interesting. Me as a woman of color, you can also see if you have biases towards people that identify in the same ways as you. So that is interesting work as well. I think understanding that you're going to feel uncomfortable when you're doing this work and when you're working to create spaces that are more inclusive and diverse and welcoming, you're going to get it wrong. You're going to get it wrong sometimes, probably more often than not. But when you're really coming from a place of I'm working to try to make this a better space. I don't know what I don't know. Please help me if you feel the need to. If not, direct me to the right spaces to learn more, right? I think sometimes just saying that out loud is helpful. I may be in a space where no one looks like me, but that also doesn't mean that there are not identities there that are similar to me, right? Unseen disabilities, my socioeconomic, I'm from the suburbs, right? That is something that we all have in common. So just little things like that. More often we're more similar than not, right? Even though we may look different. So I'd say strategies, seeking to understand, starting with that Harvard implicit bias test, change who you view on social media. Like, this is free information that we can be accessing every day. It's one of the first things that I did. What information are you soaking up on a daily basis? Is it like the shade room and all other things related? Or is it folks who are working to create more diversity, equity, and inclusion? Is it white women who are trying to unlearn their biases? Is it folks who have podcasts and this is their social media platform related to this work? Whatever, but like incorporating more things like that is really helpful. So I think those are just some simple things that you can do.
Yeah, I agree. I think for me, mine is really in in alignment, excuse me, with that as well. For me, my goal in life is always to center the most marginalized within whatever context of whatever. In knowing that I'm not always going to be the most marginalized, right? And I think for the school, for example, we know it's an online space, but creating tools that can support people who are not only visual learners, maybe, because in an online space, the visual learner is not the marginalized, right? It may be the learner who does not receive information in that way. So maybe that's including transcripts, maybe that's including, I don't know, like the AI tools that can I don't know, maybe it's closed captioning. I don't know, but you know what I mean? Like really just trying to figure out how to center the most marginalized. And I think that does take a level of empathy and understanding, right? Like I think it's a matter of not only putting yourself in someone else's shoes, but really trying to understand how to actually do that without requiring them to prompt you to, right? So, and without this comparison in a way that's also problematic. So it's not like I have to, I don't know, we've seen these stupid, so ignorant, like social experiments where people are like, I'm going to pretend to be unhoused for a weekend because I really want to see what it's like. And it's okay, I guess maybe I can understand your intention, but that's not it. It's actually insensitive because you're putting it on TikTok and your mind is how, you know what I mean? All these things, right? I think it really is this matter of doing your own learning and really just, again, figuring out who's the marginalized here. I think too, always being questionable. I typically have a platform where a whole lot of white people follow me. And for me, because of my values, I was like, I'm maybe not doing something right. If the majority is actually the ones who are following me, I probably am not doing something right. And that's just because of me. My personal value is I'm a voice of the marginalized. So if a whole bunch of white people are probably listening to me, I don't think I'm that revolutionary yet for it to be like, I'm like a Rosa Parks or like a Martin Luther King. You know what I mean? So I'm like, something to go on, you know what I mean? I have to look at myself in the mirror and figure out like, am I trying to make myself palatable? Am I trying to like, you know what I mean? I'm really have to figure out like on a day-to-day basis too, like my own kind of stuff. And I think too, which I think you're already doing, Katie, I think having your own checks and balances of accountability. Like I love that you love us enough to hold you accountable to this thing that you say that you want to be. I love that you have everybody from your partner, from your friends. I love that you have people in your life who are like, who share the same kind of values, because it really is like a life's work and you really have to kind of walk it. And not that anybody's perfect. Like Miranda was saying, we're all going to fuck up. We're all going to make mistakes. It really is this matter of, okay, impact over intent, like centering the marginalized, being so curious. Like I think it really is this matter of like this genuine kind of curiosity that will allow us to lead with love in these ways that are really beautiful and really impactful. So yeah, I think that's probably what my contribution would be as far as different strategies that I think we should use for the school.
Yeah, for sure. You brought up a few things that made me think, Cammie. I love AI, especially ChatGPT, use it for everything. I'm a Googler. I was a Googler, now I'm a ChatGPTer. Something as simple, because often people don't know where to start, right? So when we're talking about personal development spaces for other people that are doing work similar to this, whether you manage people or you have a personal development business or something like that, going into ChatGPT and simply asking, I'm working to create a more inclusive, diverse, and equitable space, whatever that space may be, an online school for insert your demographic. What are 10 ways that I can do that, right? ChatGPT is going to spit out some things for you and take it from there, right? Also, you talk about the most marginalized in a group. There are many marginalized identities, but I often think about people with disabilities. And people are going to be accessing the internet in different ways. Your screen colors. What do your colors on your website look like? Like she had said, is there closed captioning? Can folks access the information on your website in different ways? And the other thing is, try to experience things from the user's perspective. So often, like, I didn't realize, like, text, right? Okay, so now text can be read out loud. But if you throw in a bunch of emojis, that shit reads out loud like all fucked up, right? So like now you still can't access this information, right?
Yeah.
On your social media, are you including alternate text for folks to be able to read? And are you writing that alternate text correctly? So these are all things that we can be doing. If you're in an online space, how are you making that accessible? When we translate that to the real world, it's like, if you're going into a space and you don't see a wheelchair ramp or the button to open the door isn't working, like how that happens quite often, right? Now you literally can't get into the building, right? And so we think about that in the same way when it comes to your online community. Can folks even get in the door to seek this information? So I would really encourage that as well.
I like that.
To that point too, making sure like your imagery as well is not also kind of reinforcing this implicit bias. So if you're trying to teach women, for example, about rage, which I love rage and I love feminine rage especially, are the people that you have as like on your slides or whatever, are they only Black and brown? Because we know that anger, for example, is something that works to the detriment as far as society, right? For Black and brown women, right? Is it only Black men who are like these angry people, right? Or is it only white women who maybe are pictured in colors that are more like considered more like beautiful or innocent or whatever the case may be? It's like really kind of considering that, right? And also bringing it to your community, asking for feedback. Because it really is like it's so many. It's so much. But I think with care, even you asking this question is a good step. Miranda, I also just want to give you reinforcement too. When I learned what ableism was, it rocked my world. I was like, holy shit, here I am, like considered the DEI expert. It's probably 5 or 6 years ago. And I was like, what is ableism? And I was like, oh crap. And yeah, like disability, I think is a huge one as far as accessibility as well.
It really is.
Yeah. It helps me that I am autistic so that I'm like, I always notice when a coaching program does not have closed captions, and almost immediately it makes me like, I actually just got into a coaching program that does not have closed captions and I almost immediately resigned from it. But the information's good. What I'm getting from it's really good. But I was like pissed because I was like, how do you not even just have captions? Like, I feel like it's so simple to have that. But crap, what was I going to say about that? So I did think about this in depth when I was creating the cover pictures for the different programs. And I actually am going back and editing 2 of the different programs because I want to go a different direction, just because I liked how beautiful the Neuro Nirvana came out, because I made the Neuro Nirvana program, the entire thing, a Black woman who's an artist. And it like shows her going through the entire process, which I want to share with you guys to get your feedback. But I also, there was part of me as I'm creating this that I'm like, if I'm putting a Black woman on everything that I'm doing, is that me using this as a means to be like, oh, Black women should all come and take my program? Then I'm like, okay, I can't, I guess maybe this is my question to you guys, or I can go look it up myself too. But at what point is the line drawn on that?
Well, I think too, representation, right? Like you should have Black women, but you should also have other marginalized non-Black, like people of color. And you should also have white women. You should have disabled, and to push back even more, even if you did only have white women, are these all white skinny women? Are these all white or Black skinny women? Excuse me. Are they all Black able-bodied women? Right? Like it's kind of like going deeper than just someone's phenotype. It's also about, is this accessible for an autistic white, Black, brown, whatever person? Like, you know what I mean? And so, yeah, but to your point, I love that something in you is like, let me think about this. I like that.
What are your hopes for the future of DEI in community building and personal development spaces, but more specifically for Starlight Synergy School? When I first started like creating this, my biggest component was in creating DEI in this space is, how do we help in these course programs, right? That are automated course programs that people are just going through, and they're trying to do these things to help heal themselves. But how do we help people recognize the other person's experience while going through these programs while they're healing themselves?
So I think a few things. One is kind of what we just talked about. How do we make things accessible, and how are we just showing that there are different experiences out there, right? So I'm going to be doing some like DEI consulting, like contracted consulting work, and I'm going to have breakout groups like on a Zoom session. And we open with making sure that we have our pronouns next to our names, right? Something simple. We also share if maybe you don't feel comfortable sharing out loud, or if you have a disability or you have another need that we're unaware of, send us a private message and let us know if there's a best way to support you, right? And again, not that everyone has to share, but we're putting that out there, right? When you are someone who has privilege in a space, it is your job to make sure that you are opening up these doors and opening up avenues to make people feel more comfortable. Now, they may not for various reasons, but you do still need to do that piece. So I think that first and foremost, right? So I think for Starlight Synergy School, implementing some of those things that normalize certain identities, right? Where someone doesn't have to feel like they're othered because we're normalizing something in a space. Like that is part of creating a safe space, right? So I think that would be my first thing. And then really just moving forward, I hope in all spaces that people who are running these programs, the coaches, use their platforms to build up women of color, folks with disability, like folks who are marginalized, right? Using your platform to pull other people up with you. I think that is super important. So how are we highlighting other people's work? How are we shining a light on them? So on and so forth. And then really just continuing to do this work. It's never ending. How are we continuing to seek information, unlearning our biases? It's not just a one and done, a check mark in a box. So I would encourage anyone that's doing this kind of work to continue learning, and folks who are also attending these types of courses to also do that. Just like we've been talking about, just because you are marginalized in one way does not mean you're marginalized in all ways. So there's always unlearning and relearning to be done.
I love the way that you worded that, especially because if we're talking to all the white women out there that are all part of these manifestation groups and believe in these limiting beliefs and recognizing like how deep seated these are, it's just as important to recognize that is how deep seated your beliefs like have been created against people that are marginalized. So if you even have those thoughts a little bit, or even if it comes in, that is something that is so deep seated in you just as much as your limiting beliefs. So it's not something that just leaves you. It's not, you're like, you've thought your whole life that money couldn't come to you or that you've been poor your entire life. Like it's the same exact thing. You have to work through those feelings. They don't just go away.
Yeah. I think too, the main thing is I think the school and any of the coaches, whatever the value is, like whatever your core values are, every single person that you have on, no matter how successful they are or not, should align with that.
Yeah.
And if your value as a human is centering the marginalized, making sure that literally any person that you have on the podcast, any person that you have coaching, any practitioner really does align with whatever those core values are. I think oftentimes value misalignment is something that oftentimes depending on if we're like, we have to be really careful to make sure that like we do not allow our like a value misalignment, right? Like I've been in work, for example, with people where I didn't know what their values are, but I knew that at least for the most part, they were nice to me. I knew it was a career jump. I knew it was whatever. And I chose to make a lot of decisions that I now regret because I did not check to see, are we aligning the same values? And so I think really too, just making sure that the school and every single person a part of it elicits whatever those values are and some kind of safety. And again, it's an ongoing process. It is definitely not you're checking any box, but I think making sure that whatever your value is as a human being, that you are requiring anybody who has any hand in this program to have those values is going to be huge.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, thank you so much, Miranda. I want you to plug all of your things.
Okay. So I do have to say on social media, you can find me at the Unpacked Project on Instagram. There's a lot of valuable information there around allyship, anti-bias, just unlearning for folks, predominantly white women, but really for anyone. There you can be linked to our website, which has our info guides or toolkits, whatever you want to call them. They're free. So I think that's a great way to find me. I mean, I also do social media management, which isn't necessarily related to this, but I'm going to share it anyways.
Do it. I was going to tell you to do it if you didn't. So I'm glad you're just doing it.
Also on Instagram, you can find me at the Social Content Lab. And really, I really care about this work in so many ways. If you are seeking this information out, you have questions, want to know resources, feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to answer in any way.
Awesome.
Oh, thank you so much.
I just love
Great
you.
job.
Wealth of knowledge.
Yes, this was a great combo. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Let's embark on this cosmic journey together. Welcome to the Cosmic Classroom. Get ready to elevate your essence, honey, because the stars are not the limit.